Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our fifth session in the Administrator Forum series for this school year, the 2024-25 school year. These sessions are a collaboration between the Early Childhood Development Department at the Illinois State Board of Education and Early Childhood Professional Learning, or ECPL, which is a project of the Center Resources for Teaching and Learning. My name is Tammy King, and I'm the program manager that leads out our ESL and bilingual initiatives here at ECPL. So ECPL will be sending out information about future sessions through email. We'll also be posting information about future administrator forum sessions like this one on the ECPL website. There is a special section on our website called the Workbench for administrators. That page has information about upcoming professional learning and resources that are specific to your role. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please be sure that your name in the participant list is the same first and last name that you used to register for this session. We need that for attendance purposes. If you need to edit your name, you would do that by clicking the three buttons in your little picture on the window, and you would be able to change it there. Again, please do edit it if needed because we need that to be able to confirm your attendance today. Today's session will be recorded and the recording will be posted on the ECPL YouTube channel within the upcoming week. Due to the large number of participants, your microphones will be muted throughout the session. However, the chat will remain open for your comments and questions. Please remain in the session until the end to hear important announcements. And with that, now I'd like to introduce Jenny Metcalf, Principal Consultant in the Early Childhood Development Department at the Illinois State Board of Education.
Thanks, Tammy. Hi, everybody. Good to see you today. I just want to give my normal plug. Most of you are here with us every month, of which we appreciate. Want to give our plug about the Administrators Conference. If you have not registered yet, registration is live until March 20th. The conference is March 31st, evening reception, and April 1st in Champaign. Again, we really would like at least one representative from each grantee. Again, this is for administrators, not really geared towards teachers, but any administrator staff in your program. So if you haven't signed up, it's not too late. We encourage you to attend. And with that, we are going to move on to our presentation. Our presenters today are probably people that you have seen before. They are no stranger to early childhood work. Dr. Lindsay Meeker and Dr. Antoinette Taylor, they do a lot of work in the early childhood landscape, but today they are going to be talking about play-based and developmentally appropriate language and literacy strategies. So take it away, Lindsay and Antoinette.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and we just want to make sure in the chat if you can put your role and how you're currently practicing, whether it be in a district or school-based, community-based, Head Start. It just helps us get an eye on who our audience is. I'm Dr. Lindsay Meeker, and I'll let Antoinette welcome you as well.
Hey, thanks, Lindsay. And I'm already just so excited as I'm looking in the chat. I love that. Hey, see, look at me. I'm going off script already, everyone. Hi, Penelope Smith. How are you? I saw Brandy Kirk. I feel like the lady from Romp Room, and I saw Brandy Kirkland. Hey, Miss Brandy. I think I saw Miss Deidre Harris in there. But going back to what I was starting to say, I saw some folks on here who are their kindergarten coordinators, Lindsay. So I'm already so excited because really and truly, we know that early childhood education really is that birth through age 8 spectrum. But the real, such a strong link between the transitioning of children from their early childhood education and care space to kindergarten is something that the KTAC report said we should do it. All the literature that's coming out saying that when we strengthen those connections, it really helps children as they transition from ECEC to kindergarten. So I just want to give a shout out to all those folks who came in. Kelly Ann, I know you weren't expecting that. Urbana School District. Also, I went to school at U of I, so ILLI, and I have to get that shout out. A lot of administrators, we see that you're on. So always, as Jenny already said, we thank you so much for being on today. We know this is budget day in Illinois, so there's more than enough going on today. So we really do appreciate your time. We are going to jump right in. Still continue to put that information in. This is play-based, equitable, early language and literacy. Like we have been like breathing, dreaming, sleeping, this for a good, like I would say, year and a half, Lindsay, on this. We're still pushing for that. We need a full day to be able to really just do everything the way we want to do. So we've just honked it down to 90 minutes here. We're going to ask you all to just kind of hang there with us as we go through this process. But this is Equitable Early Learning. This is a little bit information about myself. Hey, everyone, that's me. Here is Lindsay. Oh, let me go back. It's clipping me too fast. Okay, that's a little bit of information about me. We're asking you all to take notes throughout our time together. Here is a wonderful way to do that because the truth is, you know, we love having time with you all, but what we really want is that as we're talking, we're hoping that you're looking at, you know what, here's a do now. I could almost get off of this webinar and take this back to my staff or my team and start sharing out. So as we're going through this, you're going to see this a couple of times, and that's just our way to remind everyone, please take notes and be prepared to share off. We'll be asking you to come off mute sometimes or jump into the chat with us. And so as we're moving forward, and I also want to just stop and say, I see a whole lot of our community-based colleagues on Centers for New Horizons. Hey there, Cheryl Queen, child care provider. Just love, love, love that we are really a whole community of early childhood education and care districts, CBO programs, and then of course welcoming our kindergarten colleagues.
And then as you're taking those notes, if you've never done sketchnoting before, you just know that it's how, there's not a rule, right? There's no rules on how sketchnoting goes. But thinking about how like containers, icons, and words will help you remember what you want to do, because usually what I do is I take my sketch note, and then when I get back to my desk, I post it right up somewhere where it's a daily reminder for me of what I thought I wanted to try, change, or know more about. And so that's how it works for me, and maybe that will work for you too. We'll be utilizing the chat often, so please make sure you're ready to be a keyboard warrior today. And also, please don't be shy to ask questions. So we'll make sure we're monitoring that as much as possible and giving you all what you need.
Gosh, PFA, PI, EHS, SA director. Get it, Mary Rosa. I mean, woohoo. I'm just really seeing, we just have a real nice portfolio here. And so we are learning from you just as you are learning from us. So really utilize that chat. We do get the chat script, and we can show you how to save that even for your own references when this is over. And having said that, as educators, you know, we're always in that, did I dot that I and cross that T space? This is a safe space for grammar. That is not an accident. We chose this pictograph on purpose just to let you know, just brain dump. When we say get into that chat, just go ahead and do it. This is a judgment-free zone. So we're not looking at any, any of the grammar and the commas and the semicolons and all of that. We just want everybody to feel free to just let those thoughts flow. We are in the day of QR codes. And so if you do have your phone handy, there will be a couple of times where we might ask you to just scan something so you can look over information that we're sharing that will help you with the share out piece. So this is not one of those times where we're saying, please don't be on your phones. Yeah, have them ready so you can scan those QR codes. Of course, at the end, we have a list of resources. So some of the things we'll be talking about, we're going to say, and we have a link at the end, so you can grab that resource for further use. Ask, 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 ask again. Throw those hands up. What is that song? Throw your hands up, whatever that song is. Stop us if we are in the presentation and it's something like, oh, you know what, I have a burning question. Feel free to throw your hand up. We are monitoring that. And if we miss that hand going off, come off mute and just say, oh, can you just halt right here? I have a burning question. And we are certainly happy to stop and address that. Gonna just jump right in and just ask all of us. This is a chat blast. So what you're gonna do here is you're gonna put your answer in and you're gonna wait for me to give you the countdown and listen to the full question, as they say on Jeopardy. Would you say in your practice, your knowledge of the Illinois Learning and Development Standards, your use of the Illinois Learning and Development Standards, and the spreading of the Illinois Learning and Development Standards across all your curricular area. That's your instruction, your assessment, your engagement with families. Would you say it's tall, grande, or vente? So you're going to put that in the chat. And then I'm going to count us down. Oh, look at All right, we'll try the chat blast on the next one. A lot of talls. Do see a couple of venties, but it looks like the majority of us is between that tall and grande. Gonna let the rest of them come in. And so I'm gonna go back, give the directions over again. For this next slide, we're gonna ask the question. It's a different question, but we're gonna use the same premise. So hold off on being a chat warrior. Think of your answer. Don't press enter until I count us down 3, 2, 1, and then all of the answers will come up at the same time. So we've talked about the Illinois Learning and Development Standards. Thinking of your knowledge and use of the Illinois State Board of Education strategic plan that started in the 23-24 school year and will end in a 26-27 school year. What is your knowledge, use, and comprehension of the Illinois State Board of Education strategic plan? Go ahead and get your thoughts in your mind. Type that tall, grande, or vente. Here comes the chat blast countdown. 3, 2, 1, go. Seeing lots of talls, a few grandes, and only one. Hey, Kathy Vickers, you better be a venti girl because you're in the work thick like me and Lindsay are. Okay, so we saw one venti and then lots and lots of talls and a few grandes. Did I miss anything, Lindsay?
No, I think it looks good. It's good to know where everybody's at. And it looks like we could probably learn from some of you as well. All the time, that's possible. And if just I'm noticing people coming in, and if you do have a different name in the chat box or in the photo box for yourself, please take the time to click the 3 dots within your name and change your name so that ECPL can make sure they know who's in attendance.
So
Okay.
why are we bringing up the strategic plan, you might ask? We're so glad you asked. Here's why. Because in Illinois, the strategic plan is specific around the practice of equity in our state. And so here's what the strategic plan says to us, right? Because this is what the equitable play-based literacy session. So everything that we're doing is grounded in equity. And Illinois still holds true to that equity framework for everything that we do based off of our strategic plan. And so as we look at this, it's just so important to say, like, yeah, we would want this for every child, every family, every educator, these wonderful opportunities that are made to fit the learner, fit the school, fit the program, so that we see success. Also, within our state strategic plan, goal number 1 is student learning. See that all word there? All students will receive high quality education with access to resources so that we increase knowledge, skills, and opportunities. And guess what? The first goal is literacy. So when our state in the strategic plan thinks about equity, thinks about learning, the first thing they jump to is, oh, that means literacy. Which stakeholders? All stakeholders. Evidence-based, of course, ESSA is all grounded in evidence-based practices. And I really think we should be excited about the fact that in the strategic plan, the State Board of Education acknowledged the importance of doing things in more than one language. Now, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I just wanted to pull that out now because we got some great stuff coming for you all. So again, evidence-based strategies to support the teaching of literacy. So our state has done what? In reference to that strategic plan, our state has a full out comprehensive literacy plan. Now, we're not going to do a deep dive into the literacy plan, but we do just want to have a goal for everyone. We know the ROEs have been talking about it, IPA is doing some things around it. And so when we think about this, it's like, oh my gosh, another thing that is put on my plate for me to do. Not really, because this is how the state board talks about the comprehensive literacy plan through these 7 components. And guess what, everyone? They actually could have came to the early childhood community because guess what? Here's why we asked about the IELDS. Our Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards, our language arts goals, standards, and benchmarks are all grounded in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So, yes, we love the literacy plan. When we see this, especially as administrators, we are just really highlighting the work that we're already doing so that our staff, our paraprofessionals, and even when we talk to families, when they look at this and this big comprehensive literacy plan, now Lindsay and I can say this because Lindsay and I are friends. We're nerds. We have read that plan so many times. Like, we love digging. It's like, oh my gosh, we need to go back. I just found something else. We know not everyone is going to do that. And so, again, just thinking about those 7 components of literacy, you all, it's the things that we've been doing through the Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards as you implement your evidence-based curriculum, as you implement your evidence-based assessment. When we think about DAP, the way NAEYC describes it, all those acronyms there, your authentic observation, all of those things are grounded in the standards that we already have. Now, there are some things that have come out in literacy, and so I'm just going to toss it to Lindsay. We're just doing a little anchoring here. I'm going to toss it to Lindsay to talk to us about where Illinois stands when it comes to the science of reading and literature.
When we think about the science of reading, sometimes that can take a political tone, or maybe people feel like they need to take sides, because really since the 80s, there's been this constant kind of push and pull about, what is science-based literacy? What is evidence-based literacy? What does it mean for strategies to be evidence-based or developmentally informed? And so really, I want us to take a breath for a minute and just know that the science of reading really is the idea that we're ensuring that we give children equitable access to and teach them with evidence-based strategies in the following areas, right? Phonemic awareness, vocabulary, phonics, fluency, comprehension, also oracy. And so sometimes you even see, depending on the source, you might see oracy as part of it or you might not. We see oracy as part of that. And so we just wanted you to understand, where does this sometimes fall? But know that it doesn't mean we have to have a boxed set that we're working from. Sometimes we might need to, right? Sometimes that's an intervention we might want to use, but that truly science of reading backed practices can be used in early childhood along with their play, along with our whole group read alouds, along with children's discussions with each other on the carpet. It really can get us there as long as we're thinking that we have both opportunities where we're teaching explicit phonemic awareness and phonics, and then allowing for kids to have opportunities to practice that through inquiry and play. There is a larger article that matches this from the Illinois Early Learning Project. So if you would like to dig deeper into that, please scan that QR code and make sure you capture that article. We want to keep moving today, but we also will place this at the end. But if you did open it up, what you notice is it tells us, how do we do this in play? How does this look in whole group? What can we depend on as far as the evidence-based strategies and child outcomes? Like, how can we make those work together? And in addition, how do we ensure our families feel like they're a part of the process? So really, it's just really good literacy tied to evidence-based programming, assessments, and materials. And so we just wanted to spend a second on that so you can feel comfortable in that definition and also give yourself time to dive into it when we're not in the call. And back to regular scheduled programming with Dr. Anjanette Taylor.
Look, my pretend microphone. Thank you, Lindsay. You know, we also have at the end of this, first of all, Illinois Early Learning Project. Love everything that they do. It's so specific to us here in Illinois. But as I said before, Lindsay and I have been really following this, not only here in Illinois, which she wouldn't say this, but I will say it. Lindsay actually was invited to be a writer on the draft of the comprehensive literacy plan. So just have like that firsthand knowledge of kind of the thinking of the State Board of Education when this was being drafted. And it also is our comfort in knowing early childhood was right in there, special education was right in there, students who are multilingual learners were right in there, MTSS, woohoo, that's my forte, it is right in there. But we want to know that it's very much grounded in ESSA. So the Illinois Early Learning Project, everything that they're doing is grounded in ESSA. But Lindsay and I have also been watching this from kind of a national level too. And the Harvard School of Education, they put out a nice document about the myths and misconceptions of, it's like to be or not to be, science-based when you're talking about the literacy. And so it's a good read to have, because as we're doing these comprehensive math plans and all of these comprehensive plans, that science-based word is in there. And when we had No Child Left Behind, rigor was defined as scientific based. And what we found with No Child Left Behind is because it really wasn't defined well. It was implemented and interpreted several different ways, not only across the nation from state to state, but we found that even in like school, within states, LEAs or school boards to school board, and sometimes classroom to classroom, scientific base was defined differently and therefore was implemented differently. As we move to ESSA, that language of evidence-based practices was meant to help us define what it means to have evidence-based practices, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. And so again, it's not like a political statement, but we did kind of shift away from that scientific base when we moved to Every Student Succeeds Act. And so that's why we just really wanted to bring that out to you. And again, Illinois Early Learning Project has done a great job of helping us understand that, particularly as we think about that developmentally appropriate practices framework that we all use, coming from NAEYC, National Association for the Education of Young Children. Since we do have colleagues on with us today that are in that kindergarten space and that early intervention space, we talked about the Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards here. We also want to just let you know that the Illinois Early Learning Guidelines really are from birth to age 36 months. So it just weaves right in there with the IELDS. And then Illinois adopted the Common Core standards. So there are kindergarten standards as well. And many, we have the literacy or language arts kindergarten standards that are available on the ISB website. So all of this is aligned with teaching and learning through the lens of standards. Why? Because that's where it's equitable. We don't have one set of standards and one set of guidelines, for students with disabilities or students on the West Side versus students that are from Winnetka. It's really what are the children we're trying to build? And for this conversation, through the point of literacy. And here's how NAEYC describes it. It's optimal development. Children are born eager to learn. Our goal is to keep it that way, right? We want them to be eager to learn to kindergarten, to first grade, to second grade, all the way through grade 12. And we know for this to happen, as the educators, and educators, if we think about Eckers 3, educator does not, they don't define educator as the teacher. They define staff as any adult that's regularly involved with children. I love Eckers 3, how they changed that. So when we see that educators there, it's administrators, classroom teachers, paraprofessionals. If you're in Chicago, I saw someone on here who's the, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat again, I saw someone on here who was the director of early learning for CPS. Woo-hoo-hoos, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's all of that encompassed in here as educator, right? We want to engage in developmentally appropriate practices. And this does not mean we abandon, well, in kindergarten, we need to be doing this. Yeah, we want to do those things, but what is the way that is developmentally appropriate? And I love how they end that, because joyful learning is something that we want to maximize for each and every child, because that's how they reach their full potential. That's a national outlook of what NAEYC says. We are blessed in Illinois to where work has been done of what this really looks like to have play-based learning. Now, Teach Plus did their focus on kindergarten classrooms. They actually did this study with kindergarten classrooms across the state. I have been blessed to have an opportunity to speak on this, work with Teach Plus on this, and what we have found. In fact, we found it, was it 2 springs ago when we were at WIU. We had early childhood folks coming to myself and Lindsay saying, "Oh my gosh, that is the best definition of play-based learning I've ever heard." So here you have we, the early childhood educators, and our everything we do is play-based learning, play-based learning. During that conference, after I presented on it, the teachers and the people there were candid enough to come up and say, I know that I'm supposed to be doing play-based learning, but I never understood it like this. So yes, this is for teachers who are in kindergarten. We want to just know it can be generalized. This definition here, it can be generalized, especially when we're thinking about literacy, really all areas. But look how they break it down. Play-based learning is evidence-based, whether it's one-on-one, one adult to one teacher, one adult to one child, whether it's small group, one adult to a few children, or whole class. It is a balance of everything that we do, where students initiate and sometimes the teacher or the adult initiates. Play-based learning is not just throwing caution to the wind and, like just, okay, kids, what do you want to do? It's look at that, grounded in the standards, aligned to standards. And again, as the educator, as the adult in the room, we are able to initiate what play will look like in partnership with our children. So as we think about play-based literacy, and we do have the link for this full report, and they've really built on it since they did the report. They give out examples of what play-based learning looks like, what the teacher is doing, what the adult is doing, what the child is doing. But this is just an excellent, excellent definition that you can use for play-based learning when you're thinking about equitable practices that are developmentally appropriate for all ages children.
And I'm going to just give you a quick pause here, Antoinette. So when we look at that play-based learning definition, you might see in the lower corner that you see that icon. This might be an opportunity where you want to stop, process, and take a little bit of notes. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds so that you can process and jot down the things that might be in your head right now. Okay. I think that's something we don't do often enough. And then I just want to go back real quick to this NAEYC position statement about developmentally informed practices. And you notice some things here, right? You see exploration and inquiry listed. You see joyful learning. You see how we find wonder in their learning. And also, what are we doing between centers, homes, childcare, schools that support optimal development, so that partnership across all domains and content areas? As you begin to dive into Illinois' plan on your own, you will notice that it does include preschool, or PK, and it has a lot of the similar conversation about joy, discovery, collaboration, play, inquiry. So on your own, when you have some time, I know none of you have time, but when you have some time, if you want to go back, and what was helpful for me is to look through it and think about, okay, what am I already doing that can be affirmed? What are maybe my teachers or what I'm doing that I need to stop? And then what are some things maybe I need to start or explore more as I think about professional learning for my team, between that NACCE statement and our Illinois plan? So I just want us to think about, how do we bring these tools to life as an early childhood administrator? And then I will get back to where Antoinette was picking up. And Antoinette, you're up.
So when we think about equitable practices, and we're just going to talk about a couple of things here today. We love this quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Language does not just describe reality, language creates the reality it describes. And so, yeah, we're talking about literacy. We talked about oracy. Words matter. Words impact not our attitudes, it impacts the culture and climate. And so for us, we are encouraging you, all of us, to think about the words we use when we define culture and climate, the words that we use when we think about our populations, the variety of social identities that are within any of our learning environments, that subgroup, at-risk population, underserved, like by accidental omission, disenfranchised, comes across as like not belonging. So we transition from talking about subgroups to special populations. And so here, just for today, and again, there are many, many more special populations. We want to just take a pause and look at and think of that asset-based lens. Asset-based lens. We affirm that unique needs of children is not a problem that needs to be solved, because that often lends to that, like, you just want to erase it and get rid of it, right? Sometimes that can translate into, again, the culture and climate that energy that comes across in our classrooms. Children feel it, colleagues feel it, families feel it. So we want to talk a little bit today about multilingual learners and children who have a diagnosed disability in this framework of equitable literacy.
So when we're thinking about our special populations of multilingual learners, as well as children identified with a disability, I think the first really important thing to acknowledge is that everything we just said about literacy and learning and all of the components of literacy, those 7 pillars, that if it's equitable, it also means that we are finding a way to make connections to a child's home language, and if possible, provide pathways to biliteracy. So I wanted to just make sure I pull that in. As you look through Illinois' documents, you'll see like it's part of our strategic plan. We saw that earlier, right? But on the ground, like, what does that look like? Do the teachers that work in your centers or school districts or your home providers, do they all understand truly that home language is an asset, and children build on that asset to build both languages up at the same time, right? To be simultaneously gaining in both languages? Do we understand that families doing storytelling in their home language with a picture book is a really valuable asset, that we want families to continue to use their home language at home while we dive into English language development at school alongside their home language amplification? So that's one piece, right? It can be considered a unique need, but if we flip that switch, it's actually a unique asset, right? Bilingualism is an asset. And so we're just thinking about what targeted supports do they need in English language development, and then how do we continue to build that asset up of home language development. We will, there's resources that we'll share with you at the end. It's a PDG report about what we can be thinking about for early learners, as we not only identify them, but as we think about how we equitably serve. Also, when we're thinking about children with disabilities, we should be jumping right into that inclusion spot, right? We should be really thinking about how are we serving our learners in an inclusive setting. So it shouldn't be, our first go-to should never be outside of the classroom. In fact, that should be the last go-to, and the most opportune way for all children, including children with disabilities, to learn and grow their literacy is with direct instruction that then is also practiced in play with their peers, right? Like that's what happens, is that kids learn it and then they make meaning of that in their play through centers and outdoor play and small groups. And so I think it's just really important for us to understand that we're serving our multilingual learners and our children with disabilities in an inclusive setting. And so that has to be our first go-to. And then we figure out how to scaffold there. And we reframe our thinking a little bit about how do we help them then access the pillars of literacy through joy, discovery, collaboration, and play in that inclusive setting? Because sometimes they might be included, but not really, right? So just because a child is in the classroom doesn't mean that's an inclusive, joyful experience for the child. How are we making sure they're really a part of the learning? So I just wanted us to bring attention to both of those items and making sure that we're working with our partners and our professionals, right? If we have our bilingual paraeducator, how are we talking with each other to figure out how we're going to use that home language to grow the child's biliteracy? If we have a special education teacher that maybe is providing itinerant services, what does that back and forth and that articulation look like? Are we meeting with families regularly to share tools about how they can use literacy in their home? So all of that brings us back to that space of inclusion. Anything I missed, Antoinette?
Just, on a national level, we are seeing more and more understanding of, IDEA and Every Student Succeeds Act being inclusive and integrated. And so for a long time, there was just kind of like unwritten or unsaid, well, IDEA is for children with disabilities, and Every Student Succeeds Act is about our students with, that would be defined as children within general education. We just recently, and I'm so excited about it, late January, we received this guided document, and it literally says, we are trying to emphasize the alignment between Every Student Succeeds Act and IDEA. And this is something that's really been in the works since 2008, during the Obama administration. The goal was to reauthorize No Child Left Behind and IDEA at the same time, so that the two laws would really speak to each other and be synthesized. We all know that IDEA is still waiting to be reauthorized. So in the meantime, the effort was made to just do this crosswalk of, Every Student Succeeds Act says this and IDEA says that. And when you put the two together, as Lindsay said, you have practices that are going to meet the needs of all children, children who may have a diagnosed disability, children who meet the criteria for a multilingual learner based off of the home language survey, students who are multilingual learners and have a documented disability, right? We call those like those thrice exceptional children. The two coming together, and it aligns it so nicely, so beautifully. And then our own Senator Tammy Duckworth spearheaded a report from the Government Accountability Office about how are we really being accessible when it comes to young children in care that have disabilities. And that GAO report came out, same thing it was saying. You have to, if you're not thinking about families, you're missing the mark. If you're not understanding that families are talking to their children in their home language at home and then not doing something about that in where they learn, we're missing the mark. And that can actually exasperate a child's disability needs if we're not careful. So that whole conversation about inclusive practices for children is really something that we should be excited about. And so since we're excited about it, we want you all to be excited about it. And we're going to do that being comfortable with silence again. And we're going to ask you to just think about that sketch note. Think of your aha, uh-oh, or even your huh moment. Huh is like that clarifying question. And we're going to take 10 seconds here. And then the next thing after that, we're going to ask you to jump in the chat. So 10 seconds of silence. So take those notes that you wrote and think of this question. And go ahead and share in the chat.
So those of you who are auditory, what steps has your program taken or have you taken to expect and celebrate differences and to ensure that all children and families feel welcome and embraced?
And this again, it is a safe space. So remember what Lindsay said, sometimes you have to think about the thing you should start doing. So it's certainly okay to say, you know, my aha moment is we need to start doing this, or I'm going to meet with my team so that we can start doing this. An aha moment can be, yeah, we've kind of touched on it, but maybe we need to go a little bit deeper. Every answer here we embrace, and so feel free to be candid.
And if you are in a community-based setting, and we have both school and community-based here, I'd like us to really think about when we say, and then I'll be quiet so you can do what you need to do in the chat box where it says all children and families feel welcome and embraced. What are we doing to articulate with one another so that families don't get caught in the middle, right? Where are we helping for us to team up and support children and families together? And so then I'll give you a second to get your stuff in the chat box. And I'm checking the chat box for any questions also. Okay, there's several. I want to make sure I can see the chat box for a minute.
Really good ideas in here, Lindsay.
Yes.
Upon
So,
enrollment, each family completes a family flag that displays their values, culture, hobbies, and family. Family flag is displayed in the classroom all year.
and we have, working with your state partners, so ECPL and StarNet, reaching out and saying, hey, we need some support. These are all fantastic thoughts. So,
Don't we love the apps, Lindsay?
I do.
The apps are really saving us these days. Thanks for
Nice job.
sharing that, Val. Oh, that went by so fast. I'm going to try to go back up to that. Val was saying, I'm not in the classroom, but I'm going to encourage our teachers to reflect and write down what access they think every student has. They also should share these with the families. And isn't that the truth? Because for goodness sake, they get enough phone calls about other things. What about those asset-based phone calls? So as you all are keep going in the chat so we can move along, Going to just go back to that strategic plan and goal 1.2 talks about statewide system of support, how ISB will work with stakeholders to develop a continuous improvement model. And when you see that system of support, you already know we're getting ready to talk about multi-tiered system of support. And this is going to just be a real quick snippet so that we can move along. We've already said before that the Every Student Succeeds Act is really ground in equity, and it is truly ground in sustaining student outcomes and improving student achievement through a multi-tier system of supports lens. It really did a paradigm shift from No Child Left Behind, where we were talking about response to intervention. What are we going to do when children don't learn? When children don't learn, to that asset-based model of, no, we're focusing on leading and sustaining student outcomes, because we all know, whatever you focus on is really what you get. So if you're focused on, well, the children aren't learning, we don't want them to have a difficult time learning, that's kind of where you end up at. Whereas the asset-based model of MTSS really does a paradigm shift for us. It leads us to that culturally and linguistic responsive multi-tier system of support, a comprehensive framework so that it's developmental, it's social, it's emotional, it's academic, it's behavioral. We can even put medicinal in here if we're talking about whole child, whole school. This actually came to us from the Department of Ed, and I believe it was summer of 2020, yeah, July 2022, when we really applauded, because for the first time, we saw the Department of Ed and Health and Human Services explicitly talk about MTSS in early childhood programs, so that it was not just at that K-12 level. We customize what we do for children. And then again, we use our data not to browbeat teachers over the head. What happened with your Eckers 3 summary report? You didn't get all sevens. We use data, whether it's your My Teaching Strategies data, your DRDP, your screening data, for our kindergarten, our kids' data, to help us understand the needs of our children so that we can address long-standing inequities when it comes to achievement. And that includes children who have disabilities, children who are multilingual learners. We are lucky, we're blessed here in our state to where we've always had that lens on early childhood, when it was RTI and then transitioned to MTSS. ECPL, their grant deliverables include MTSS. You can just scan this real quick. It'll take you directly to the ECPL MTSS page. You will notice a lot of informative resource links there, and it includes inclusive practices for children with disabilities, as well as children who are multilingual learners.
And I think something that I'd like to mention too is that conversation of assets. The more we change our language, the more we can change our actions. And I think Antoinette mentioned this earlier, but really reframing that thinking, right? So if it says the child can't produce more than 3 sounds in English, right? Instead, we could say the child can provide I don't know, 15 correct sounds in Spanish and 2 correct sounds in English, right? So we're just changing our conversation to change the way we treat children and treat families and run meetings. I know it sounds like kind of hokey, like it's the same thing. You just said the same thing to me. And I know, but there's huge cognitive research about like the power of shifting your language that can shift your actions. And it's based in positive psychology, but it's also just a really easy thing to do. Like even when we go to meetings, we can even provide our staff with sentence frames that can help them change their language from what the child can't do to what the child can do. Like even just put them on the wall, because there is definite research around that.
So if you had a chance to open up that QR code, we're going to do another bit of silence here and ask you to think about what you may have seen in there that you can explore more and add to your toolbox of teaching and learning. The wonderful thing about multi-tiered system of supports is it takes multiple evidence-based practices, of which there are many. There is the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. Illinois, by law, has we have a trauma law, and we must include trauma practices. We have in our everyday embedded practices, of course, we have the standards. We have the resiliency toolkit. We have no shortage of evidence-based practices. The problem is we're often looking at those evidence-based practices and implementing them as siloed pieces of instruction for teaching and learning, which is impossible. I don't care how great a teacher you are, how great a conference presenter you are, trying to implement all of those evidence-based practices separately, it is not sustainable. But if you take those evidence-based practices and you begin to create a system of the multiple tiered supports, then what you find is, oh, I have a well put together machine here that I can easily manage and I can easily implement, that allows me, number one, as an educator, to feel good about the work that I'm doing because I can manage it. But then it allows me to meet the needs of all of my children, as well as all of the required. Well, you got to do this, you got to do that. Well, what about, your teacher evaluation, whether it's the Danielson framework, those of us that are from Chicago, it's the REACH framework, right? Oh, wait a minute, we're being monitored this month, this year. Oh, hey, each of these things are evidence-based practices, and MTSS, it literally takes the needle and threads everything together to create one whole system so that you have the needs of each and every child and educator and family met through one holistic framework. So as you think about your sketch notes, how could a synthesized framework support your teaching and learning? And just take a couple of minutes to put that in the chat, and then we're going to move on.
So we know that right, that child-led immersive experiences help children take the skills that are foundational and bring those to those highest levels of proximal development. So I just like this quote by Rudolf Steiner: young children learn best through immersion in an unself-conscious imitation of practical activities, focusing on experiential education and imaginative play. And just reminding ourselves that sometimes play is going to be the vehicle for things like content, language skills, literacy skills. And sometimes play is going to be a free play experience where we're hoping that the skills we've taught in that more guided play come to life when children are in a child-led space with opportunities to use self-agency. And one of the tools that we can use to really elevate literacy to a whole different level is wonder. So if you look up in the top corner, I love this one because they're looking at a shadow box and you can just see their eyes kind of open up brighter. That look of wonder in a child's eye, that's our cue that at the same time, their dendrites are on fire, right? Their brain is so ready to take information in because the inquiry piece or the discovery or the wonder piece has opened them up to be able to say, even if this is hard for me, I'm going to keep at it because I really need to know the answer. This is a burning question for me now. And then it also allows us the opportunity to then start threading in those social studies and science concepts through our speaking, listening, reading, writing, so that kids are having that enriched background experience. We also know that wonder, when a whole class wonders together and we start to have that child agency come to life, that we've actually learned that it does help reduce the power structures that naturally tend to kind of bombard our classrooms. because things like language are power, right? Skills seem like power sometimes. So if we set our classrooms up to have child agency, we're putting that content and literacy in through play, we actually can see the classroom become more responsive by the nature of that. I'd like to take a minute because I want us to think about what is the power of observe, notice, wonder for kids in our classrooms, but also for us as adults. So I'd like you to take a minute to observe. And then notice something in particular. And then I want you to think of a question that can't be answered with yes or no about what you're seeing, about the image or the provocation in front of you. And then just type that question in the chat box. And no, we're not doing this so I can help all of us learn about snow today. You probably like, we're over it. We don't want to learn about any more snow. What I'm doing is I'm hoping that you notice other people's questions as they emerge in the chat box to see what wonder can do for question development. Where do different people's heads go? Because in a classroom, the same thing will happen as long as we scaffold it and we provide like a sentence frame for the questioning, or we've taught how to ask questions and we've modeled it. Even in 3 to 5, they can ask very quality questions because their curiosity is of a 3 to 5-year-old is at its maximum capacity as long as we don't shut it down. So what are we doing to continue with that questioning, the how, the why, the what if, right? Because that leads us to literacy skills, because when we want to learn about something, we're able to overcome some of those literacy components that might feel difficult. Every child's going to have areas of literacy where it feels more natural, and then areas of literacy where it's going to take more teacher prompting, more supports, more scaffolds. We know that contextualization is key, especially for your multilingual learners. How are you taking the content of science or social studies or social emotional learning and then driving your literacy through that model? Okay, how are we bringing those ideas and concepts to life? Because when we're acquiring language, we're thinking about what is the comprehensible input? And really that just means, are we giving things to kids in a developmentally informed way, information to them so that they can take it in? Are we providing low stress opportunities for output like play, songs, poems, small group, read alouds with collaboration so that we can get to language development? But we have to have both of those. The input has to be comprehensible. And sometimes we might try to scaffold that by using some home language. We might try to scaffold that with visual supports or photographs or visual directions or watching a clip, any of those kinds of tools that go along with our content of what we want them to take away from like a read aloud or a nonfiction text walk. And then we're thinking about what are those low stress opportunities for output. So what kind of practice are we giving them in play that they feel like they can overcome that affective filter, so they feel ready to try something new, which might be speaking in English about something that they've only ever talked about in Spanish, right? It might mean it gives them the brave writing, like they can get to brave writing because they know that it's low stress, right? I get to write about something that I know or that I just learned about. And then we get to language development. In this picture, you see a word wall at the bottom. That's where I take kids' questions and I put them up on the wall. And so like, if you're in the trees study, for example, in creative curriculum, you would then, all those questions would be about trees. And then throughout the course of time, you'll answer them together. And then you also see things from the building and construction unit where they had some Play-Doh and actual real building tools, because RealYa also helps us with comprehensible input. So as you're in teachers' classrooms, you're looking for that good noise, right? You're looking for RealYa that relates to the content area. You're looking for, do kids have opportunities to collaborate? Who's talking more, the teacher or the students? The children or the teacher, right? Who's doing the work? Because we also know that different kinds of language come alive in different kinds of play. So for example, process art and messy play. What you see there is actually Lego painting. So they had different Lego blocks, and we were studying light and dark. So they had black and white paint. But that process art and messy play, that is one type of play that elevates that descriptive language like almost nothing else can do, right? It's squishy, it's slimy, it's, you know, like all of that process art and messy play. Like if I'm making fake snow with lotion and cornstarch, what does that feel like? It allows them to really rely on their senses and come up with ways to describe that, which then as they begin to write in emergent writing, it leads to then more descriptive writing and more descriptive conversation, more complex language. And then we look at dramatic play, and that is such a way for our characterization to come to life, beginning, middle, end to come to life. And if we can provide some tools in dramatic play, we can also make that content-based. So what you see there is dramatic play is set up like a farm. The kids built the barn out of cardboard. It was really cool. But they also had a stack of picture cards that would help them think about what they wanted to do in their play. And they had some materials in the art center where they could make their puppets. So this particular one, they were making weather puppets, and they were talking about the weather on the farm. Here, rough and tumble play. As administrators, you hear this rough and tumble play and you're like, right? Because that's the area where we're thinking about liability and all of those pieces. But if we can step back and examine the agreements that we have in place with children about their behavior outside, and think about how can we let them experience some of that rough and tumble play while still being safe and secure. So for example, if there's a big snow mountain, that's what you see here. And that was like a big draw on the playground. And there was this rule, right? When I got there as principal, is that you cannot play on the snow mountain. And I said, we have to step back for a minute, because when kids learn to take risk and they learn that they can do hard things and negotiate with their own feelings of fear, then they're able to jump into some of those academic tasks that push them further, that they might have fear about, a little more easily, because they've learned how when I fall down on the snow and my hands get cold and red or maybe scratched a little bit, I was still okay. Same thing as if I stumble over reading a particular book in kindergarten, I know I can do hard things. I can try it again. Rough and tumble play also lights up a part of our brain that doesn't happen in any other kind of play, and it builds resilience. So we want to remember that. Academic play, you know, if you can do it in sand or with shaving cream or loose parts like phonemic awareness, things like that, if you can do it in play, throw the worksheet away. Literally, if you can do it in play, throw the worksheet away. So, and it works backwards. If you can take a worksheet and help teacher teams look at a particular worksheet that they might use for, say, letter sound correspondence, and talk about how they can use their tools in their classroom to have a multisensory experience for children. If they just did that one change, if they just made that one change, it's very likely that engagement would increase significantly, and probably also outcomes. So then discovering loose parts is a good place for us to practice things like sorting and counting and questioning. But you can also do literacy in loose parts. So for example, if I have sticks I collected on a nature walk, I can build letters of the alphabet. If I have acorns, I can use them to count out sounds, right? I can put an acorn on the table for each sound. I say that because you're looking at what we brought in for loose parts during tree study. So just thinking about how do we bring children into that space of being able to play through it, right? To be able to take that content, take that direct instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics and writing, and then apply that in their play. And so, for example, if I'm thinking about different kinds of literacy standards, right? And I'm thinking about, well, I want to start looking at nonfiction text, and maybe our unit is on weather, maybe I'm gonna do that patterns in the snow. Well, you know what's cool about that is there's a correlating picture book, The Snowy Day, which also it shows making patterns in the snow. And so I'm gonna like talk about that. And then maybe I can even get some cotton balls and I don't know, let's go back to acorns, cotton balls and acorns and actually make some patterns. So then I've actually tied in that math piece too. So really thinking like, how do you anchor to your text? As we're reading patterns in the snow, I can stop and ask kids to talk to each other about their snow experiences. They don't need to talk to me, they can talk to each other and I can listen so that I'm able to assess that speaking and listening skill. So that would be like, this would be like a text set, maybe if our topic was snow. And then I can dive into that language experience approach. I'm going to take a content-based provocation. Okay, in this case, it's that we went outside and looked for different footprints in the snow, which related back to what? Snowy day, right? And also related back to our patterns in the snow, nonfiction read aloud. And we're going to look for patterns that already exist on the playground and then make our own. And we might even try it like, oh, that's what it looks like if we made it with a boot. But what if we use a Lego? What's it look like, right? So just thinking about how we give them that provocation that's really going to get their attention, an experience. And then we're going to model in context how we want them to talk about it. And we might add a language structure. We might add a sentence frame where they hear the sentence frame that says, I enjoyed blank in the snow. And they're actually have them turn to each other and practice that sentence frame. Then you're going to have them add the content. I enjoyed stomping in the snow. I enjoyed building a snowman in the snow, whatever it might be. And then you might have them make some fake snow in their centers. You might put up different pictures of snow forts all over the wall in blocks and building and see if they decide to build a snow fort, right? That's like a play invitation. And then in that play invitation, you're going to figure out, how am I going to like push that oracy? Well, maybe I'm going to plant myself in that center for the week, and I'm going to start asking questions about what they're building. I'm going to have them make a plan and share their plan with a peer. And then that's where I can start to assess that language and content skills during play as well. So once I've taught it, I've modeled it, then maybe I'm going to be sitting in that center for a while and I'm going to be assessing. So I want to stop for a minute. Does anybody have questions on language experience approach? And you can put them in the chat box. Or you can unmute as well. And Antoinette, do you see any questions coming in?
I'm monitoring, and in the meantime, we had a whole lot of great wondering questions about the snowball pyramid. So
Oh, good.
yeah, I'm really excited that we can capture this chat for everyone to share, because they were really good wondering questions that could be generalized for any type of project that they might be working on.
And remember, modeling your own questions for kids, like if you can like maybe team teach something with your speech language path, or you and your paraeducator work together to assess or to share that. That's exciting. Okay, early literacy add play.
Oops, so
So
Lindsay, we did get a question about
yeah.
provocation and how much is that approach grounded in the Reggio
Okay,
pedagogy?
yes. So for some of you in here are after my heart. It is very relevant to Reggio experience. You don't have to operate under an entire Reggio inspired classroom to use provocation, because actually we can use provocation across ages and stages in any kind of academic setting. But yes, the idea is that when I give a provocation, that a child can tap into those 100 languages they have to kind of access learning from that launch point of a provocation. And then that's where we get their own questions, right? And that's where I can build on the play invitations to answer their questions. So yes, and I wish we had so much time to talk about that, because now I feel like I want to jam with you because it's so great. But yes, it does lean into that Reggio approach. So when we're thinking about early literacy, then adding play, I just kind of walked us through a little bit of that, but we want to make sure, where are we intentionally adding opportunities for children to practice oral language and vocabulary development? Do we have pictures on the wall with the words? Are we using the technical vocabulary when we talk to them, right? Because we should be. We want to make sure we're using technical vocabulary and trusting them to use it. Where are we adding phonological awareness, phonemic awareness? So once they've, you know, maybe once they've collected their items from outside, we can have them use it to practice sounds. Are we teaching that explicitly too, and then allowing them to practice it in their play? Memory and visual recall. Are we asking kids to retell stories? Are we in dramatic play? We could read a story aloud, and then we could put characters from the book in dramatic play so that kids can work on their memory and retelling, and then even put the book over there so that they can lean back into it if they want to. Making sure that they have print access and active engagement with books and text. I'm going to teach them to read the pictures together. I'm going to teach them sentence frames to talk about the book. I'm going to expect that my library center or book center is somewhat noisy, right? Because that's how I know they're engaging with the text. Do I have a listening center where they can listen and watch a book? Early concepts of print and purposes of print. Making sure, like, we start with that, they draw it, and maybe we do the transcribing, right? But as soon as they feel ready and we start to see that interest, we want to start having them write the sounds that they hear. And one of the best ways to do that is to respond to a really exciting provocation. One of the most exciting ones I had that just threw kids for a loop was I brought in one of the air plants, right? That you don't actually plant in the dirt. And that and they were excited, as well as one that has just the water, like the hydroponics. They were super excited about looking at that, and boy, did they try to write their questions about it. Making sure we're bringing early attentiveness to print beginning letter knowledge. So maybe I'm, you know, reading that book about snow, but then maybe I model an acrostic with snow and ask for kids for the different words that could be a part of our acrostic poem, so that we can build that as a shared writing experience. So each role is really important, and we need to use evidence-based practices, but none really has a priority over another. The priority is that we learn to give it to children in a way they can take it in developmentally informed ways, and that we give them the opportunities for low stress practice. So then we also have to think about, how are we going to structure it so that, how are we going to structure it so that all children can access from the moment of provocation all the way to where they might be experiencing emergent writing, or that speaking with a peer, or pointing to things in a text? First, I'm going to watch them play, and I'm going to think about, what do the observations and interactions tell me the children's needs are? What do I notice they need in small group, but what do I also know that they need out in play? What are the language and literacy demands of the activity? And this is a big one, right? So if we put, for example, sock puppet materials in dramatic play, and they're making their own sock puppets, and they get to, you know, create a story, and they're going to retell that story. When we really break that down into the micro skills, there's a lot of that there. They have to be able to think of a story. They need to understand sequencing. They might need to understand characters a little bit better and how they work together in a story. So we want to break those skills down so that then step 3, we can think about what modifications or scaffolds will be needed so that everybody can ensure access and engagement, right? Are we ensuring access and engagement for everyone? There might be activities where you're thinking, you know what, I really would love to have my speech path come in for the first day of this. So maybe you do some team teaching, because maybe what you think is that your children that might have language delays might need some additional support. So maybe that speech path could be in the center of focus for that day, and you could be circulating with the class, and then maybe you could even do some modeling together. So that's just a way for us to think about instruction, so that it comes to life for all children, not just some children. And again, just a reminder to us that then we're thinking back to that comprehensive input through our text sets, through opportunities for them to explore and observe, talking about it, making sure I give them hands-on multisensory experiences. Maybe even we're listening to a song about it, right? So depending on the topic, I might be able to find some music on that topic and just play it during breakfast time or during snack. Learn the songs a little bit. And then that low stress output where kids are engaging in either play or developmentally informed reading, writing, speaking, and listening practice. And then how is my environment responding to that? Do I have labels on things? Am I, for example, with the snow forts, did I print off the pictures and put them up on the wall? Do kids know what to do? Are there visual directions for maybe the block center, because they don't really know exactly what to do in there? Do you provide pictures to help them? Do you model it? If it's a multilingual classroom, is there a way that you can think not only about just labeling the things in the classroom, but making sure that you are highlighting opportunities for children to play in language peer partners, and for you to really encourage that translanguaging? Because responsive is me saying, I love how you're using your language to make sense of that book, or to do the play, right? And so you might say something like, I'm excited that I heard you retelling your story in Spanish. The opposite of that would be, oh, you might want to try that in English. We've been working really hard. So what's the difference, right? What does it mean to be responsive? This is for those of you who use creative curriculum in your buildings. Here's some examples of like that provocation. As we went out and studied trees, they were feeling the trees. They were using the iPad to take pictures of the trees. I printed those pictures out and hung them up in the room. They were actually measuring trees with the measuring tapes. They had all the different books about trees and plants. And this was in preschool, second semester. And this is a tree poem. And so we talked about the tree poem, and you can see I started to bring those foundational skills to life, right? We identified the sight words. We identified particular sounds. And then they said this every day, and we did TPR. So everybody was doing, this tree is wide, this tree is tall, right? And showing that with their hands. This tree is small, and they would like crunch their bodies down. This tree is thin. So we included that total physical response. The observations was a shared activity where after we got done being outside, we talked about what did we see, what did we feel, and what did we know. And then there's that fiction text connection of a tree named Steve. And that book allowed us to also bring in social emotional skills just because of the content of the book. If you've never read A Tree Named Steve, I'm not crying, you're crying. You will like think, what, this story is amazing. And then you'll see down here in the corner where that emergent writing came to life. And this was like I said, these were preschoolers, second quarter, or second semester, and 85% of the classroom was multilingual learners. And this is from one of our multilingual learners that came in September, and they wrote a tree is fun. And then they drew a picture of a tree house that they saw in A Tree Named Steve. Now, a tree is fun. Was it all spelled exactly right? No, but could I see that letter sound correspondence was developing? Absolutely. Up here, you see a process art where they were using different art tools to recreate what they know about trees, the nonfiction things about trees. And you can also think about doing some play plans, because play plans really allow children to take self-agency in the context of play to talk about what they plan to learn or do. And it is really nice for emergent writing, because as you look, and we're going to see a picture in a minute, but a play plan can start as just pictures. I always have them stop and talk about their play plans, so I bring in that oral language development, or oracy, right? I have them say, today I plan to, I might, and you'll see that in a minute. This is a great opportunity for them to use their home language and translanguaging. Then I have them move to pictures and labels, then 2 to 3 words. And then eventually, as you see play plans develop over time, so for our kindergarten friends in the room, thank you for being here. And if you articulate across your grade levels from preschool all the way up through the end of kindergarten, and you all use play plans, that's a structure of writing that the child already knows. That cognitive lift of like, what am I even supposed to be doing? That's already taken care of, because you've already taught them about play plans, and then you can really measure that writing over time. It's a great opportunity for low risk writing in the target language. So this is, oops, sorry. Okay, so when you look here, here's some examples of different ways that you could think about play plans. This one, one of them there, they were just thinking about books, or no, I'm not, sorry, books, blocks. And so today I will build, and they drew a picture of it. If it does not go as planned, I will. And this was in a kindergarten classroom second semester. But you look here from the preschool, and you see the one where they're beginning to plan and label. Plan de juegos, right? And so they wrote their I will, and then whatever they were going to do, but I might possibly do this. So we talked about where that lesson came from is in that classroom. I was teaming with the teacher in that classroom for some coaching, and we were trying to help them talk about changing their mind. Like, what do they do if you change your mind? And so you see those in there. And we remember that when we do play plans, we always want to teach how to do it, model how to do it, provide a shared writing activity where they're writing with you to write a play plan, and then move to independent or partner writing. Some people think play plans should come very naturally, so they don't do all the steps of teach, model, shared, independent. But really, if you want to get the emergent writing mileage out of play plans, you really need to sink into that. This is such, as I think about being a preschool principal, this was one of the things where I could really get my whole team on board. It was a preschool kindergarten building, but I was able to get my whole team on board to say, okay, let's look at one common writing assessment that happens naturally in play. And when we all were able to do it, we were really able to step back and think about what we needed to focus on in that emergent writing process for our children. So we have some different articles here. We don't have a ton of time, but I would like you to think about which article you'd like to skim. So we're just gonna skim your article, and then we'll take a minute in the chat box, because I don't want us to run out of time, but you'll have these here as well. So go ahead and scan the article that seems most interesting to you. And then just take, I'll say, a minute to scan through it. See if you see any keywords. I'm going to start a timer for us now. Okay, so really why I wanted to show you this is if you're trying to really amplify the play in your spaces where you're the part of the leadership team, this is like a good soft launch into helping your teams learn about all the different research that's out there. And so you would like either print or give them the QR codes for articles, or maybe a different article that you like better, but you give them some agency over which articles they want to choose, right? They're going to read that article and then you're going to put them into collaborative group talk. And I would use something like talking chips where they have to take turns, or even like a timed sharing opportunity so that everybody at the table gets an equitable conversation piece. Even staff need to feel like their voice is heard, right? Not just children, but also our staff. And then this can really just launch that conversation, especially if you maybe have some people that really feel like they need to control the play, right? They feel very worried about letting kids have agency and free play. Even when there's content, just letting the kids make choices about their play. So a couple of these articles are really good for that. Or if you're trying to then articulate with your kindergarten teams, how can we gather around some research base that's also not difficult to read? And then just have them share with one another through like a jigsaw. Or one time I used it was really fun. Each group made an anchor chart about the article they read and they like presented it to the group. So just a reminder, we talked a lot about what play is, but mostly I want you to remember that it's fun, joyful, and complex, but it's also a way for kids to socially negotiate meaning and navigate complex skills. What I want you to take away from the is not is that it doesn't replace whole or small group literacy. You still really need that targeted oracy and reading foundational skills development and writing foundational skills development. It's a place for them to have low stress practice. And it's not a worksheet. We don't have time for me to worry about that, but it's not a worksheet. And then you have these already, your Illinois Development and Learning Standards. We talked about them. And we do have a session coming up at the Administrators Conference, so we hope we see you all again. And then there's some additional resources for you to enjoy. There is one in particular called the Snow Day Process Art Example. Obviously, I didn't write the Snowy Day book. It's just, it walks you through how to do process art with kids and include literacy. So I'm gonna try to open that up super fast because we have 1 minute left. So it looks like this, and you will be able to access that. And then we're also going to we will also be putting in your resources a new report that's out for PDG report about serving multilingual learners in preschool and community-based settings. So congratulations, Tammy King is on here and she was the lead on that. So that's amazing. And it's really, really a clear tool for all of you. So we'll make sure we have it linked there.
And just so you know, when we do this again at the conference, we get to play like everything we've talked about. We are going to actually have some of those manipulatives right there in the room with us so that we can, as we say, model and practice what we preach. So again, Jenny talked about the conference. If at all, if it's possible for you to be there, it's just a great time to connect and just take what we're doing virtually and do it in practice and network with each other. So we do hope to see you there and see you in our session.
All right. Thanks for being here today, everyone.